Well, good morning, and unfortunately for you, here I am again. So that was a fantastic presentation from Arnold, about these sources of extraordinary information that can work really well for you and your institution. I've been given the job of looking at the other resources that are available in this area, resources for those of you who don't have access to these big commercial resources, or don't want to have access to them because you don't like them, or you like the other ones, or you want to use everything at the same time. So, as you already have gathered from Arnold and from the presentation yesterday, you know, there's a great Polish expression which says, "Not my circus, not my monkeys." You know, well, we know this is your circus. These are your monkeys, right? These are all our monkeys. We have to get used to them. And this one is the one in particular. All of these are interrelated. You could see from what Arnold was saying that, you know, research profiles are linked in with metrics. The ORCID number keeps coming up all the time when we talk about this. The open access is coming into it, and actually data management and data sets are being cited as well. So they're interlinked. But we're focusing today on this beautiful creature here, the metrics, as you know. And yesterday, you remember that I broke down the metrics at a high level into bibliometrics, the traditional metrics that we were talking about, the Web of Science and Scopus, which Arnold was just talking about. We're going to take a look at dimensions, or dementia, as sometimes I call it, but that's a general term. And that is no reflection on a wonderful tool. Google Scholar and others similar to those. The next area, Altmetrics, you've heard something about that to see what's available for us in this area. And then Open Science Metrics, this kind of new area. All of these last two fit into what they call next generation metrics, which are moving ahead really quickly. Now, the whole thing, the whole environment and the landscape, which we looked at again earlier, I mentioned, and we've looked at our Scopus and Web of Science, Dimensions, Google Scholar. Those of you who were in Moldova at our workshop remember Publish or Perish and Microsoft Academic Search, and there's a whole bunch of new ones have come in just recently. And you'd wonder, why have they all come in? Well, a huge amount of the responsibility is because it's down to the wonderful Open Citations initiative, or Open Citations project. So this is where previously all of these information on citations and bibliometrics that came from it were locked into first Web of Science and then Scopus as a huge publisher. But then, based on an article in Wikimedia, just a single article, which pointed out the craziness of the fact that this information was locked into these commercial databases, which incidentally, those of you who don't know, are very expensive. So that excludes a lot of the world, so that who are either can't or won't pay for these resources. Open Citations meant that working with Crossref, the Public Library of Science, and a number of other agencies working in this area worked with early adopter publishers like Taylor and Francis and others who became involved with this, and they agreed that they would share this citation information openly. And you can have a look at the resource on the web for the Open Citations project. It's brilliant. A lot of the major funders, starting with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Sloan Foundation, supported the Open Citations initiative from the very beginning. So things are changing very rapidly in this area, and that's a good thing. Not only from the point of view of us being able to get more access to more of this information for free, but the functionality is changing before our eyes. So we're not going to be able to go into this in a huge amount of detail today, possibly, thankfully, but we can have a look at some of it, and I'll give you some links that you can follow up with as well. So this is what we're looking at. So this gives you an idea of some of the things that we're going to look at within the next little while. And some of them will look familiar to you and some might not. So let's start by looking at those metrics. under the not microscope but the magnifying glass, and we're going to look at them by, when I say accessibility in this way, I mean is how can we access, do we have to pay or not? In other words, we're going to look at their coverage at a kind of a very simple level and their functionality as well. And I have to say, this is not an in-depth analysis. It would take too long to go in and compare and contrast these resources because they're very different from one another, a lot of them. So here we are. Arnold already gave us a brilliant breakdown looking at Kyrgyzstan and looking at and that's really important to do that. Mastering this information, mastering your own information in whatever database out there is really important. But you can see that Web of Science, of course, is a subscription-based model, and its analysis tool, Insights, of course, is also subscription-based, and they charge for them separately. Scopus is the same. Scival is even more expensive. So what you often find is that the source of the data is available and you can do some analysis on Web of Science, but to do more analysis and benchmarking, we look at this later, you have to pay sometimes twice the price of the actual data set itself just for the analytics platform, which maybe, certainly in my institution, maybe 2 or 3 individuals in the institution will actually use this on a reasonably regular basis. This is not for everyone, right? So you're going to have some people this is like your 3 experts that we talked about yesterday in the library, and maybe one person in the research office, and some kind of professor who's suffering from OCD or something like that, they'll keep looking at their stuff. Those are really the only people who are going to be looking at these analytics programs. And they tend to be very expensive. The new kid on the block, Dimensions, is very interesting. We'll be looking at that in some detail. There is a free version that's freemium, but you pay more for the analytics. We'll look at this, so you get this double. Google Scholar, we all know about it. It's free. And so is Publisher Perish, which is also open source. So that comes from Anna Hartzing, and it's a very useful tool that works with Google Scholar. Microsoft Academic Search comes from Microsoft Research, that giant. We'll take a look at it in a few minutes. It's free, and it does actually provide APIs so that a lot of other services are using Microsoft Academic Search data. So that's interlinked. A new one to me, which I discovered when I was doing the background research for this, is lens.org. And it's becoming something that I'm really going to start to look at some more. So we look at it as well. And Milan mentioned yesterday, he talked about One Finder from Max Planck Institute, or One Science, which isn't really a bibliometrics tool. When you look at it, it's really about finding huge numbers of publications and discovering which ones of them are open access. It's a great tool for analysing your library publications and your library subscriptions, but it also provides altmetric information in the middle of that. So let's look at these in a little bit more detail. First, Dimensions. I'm only going to look at the free versions of these. Why? Because I don't have access to the commercial one. Although I do have to say, I'm going to put my hands up here, I was invited as part of 100 institutions around the world to become a development partner in Dimensions. That sounds like I was more involved than I was. What it meant was that a bunch of people from the NIH in the US to people in Oxford and Cambridge, and Trinity College Dublin, and possibly people in your own country came online every now and again and gave each other webinars on what they're doing and what they needed to do. That's been it, basically. So we haven't really had any say in the form or the shape that Dimensions has taken, but it is very interesting. So this is a very large resource. The figures, when they launched only on the 1st of January this year, so this is their free version, they have over 90 million publication records. So Dimensions is really interesting. It's unique in that it doesn't only have publications records, it also has records on funding, because it came from this resource that was originally looking at research grants and their information. So the free version does not have the grant information in it, but I have seen it in a trial. So you can go into a trial, and maybe that's all you need is a trial. You can go in and look at the information for your institution. I was amazed at how accurate the funding information was. So that's telling us who in my organisation has received which grants from which institutions. Wellcome Trust, you want to see who got the latest grant, how much it was worth. And I can also check and go, I'd love to see who else got a Wellcome Trust grant in this area anywhere in the world. Some people in my research office have said, this is a poaching tool. This is a tool that you could use to find talent. And so you can be sure that if somebody has subscriptions to this and is using this, they're looking at the talent, and they're looking at the talent in your institution. So we better look at it ourselves as well and make sure that we know who those people are within our institution and who somebody else is going to come in and try and get them, pick them off. So that idea that Ireland has about sending letters of congratulation to people is a really good one. Just show people that they're valued within their institution. So in addition, on Dimensions, there are over 128 million documents. There's even more it's being added to every single day. And they have these, what they say, 4 billion connections. So that's, I'll come back to the connections again in a minute. Under the subscription angle on this one, there's also patent information, information on the $1 trillion worth of research funded projects, clinical trials, which are really important, and they have institutional and country analytics in that area. It's kind of interesting to see quite a lot of these resources are making the data available for free, but the analytics are what is going to cost you. However, there's ways around this kind of thing, and sometimes you can do those analytics yourself. So just looking at Dimensions in a little bit more detail, and there's a link there to an article which is about Dimensions. Here's an example of a Dimensions record. I looked up one of our researchers, Roseanne Kenny. She's works in aging and gerontology. And you can see this record. This is available for free over on the right-hand side, your right-hand side. You can see the Dimensions badge. You can take those badges and they will actually allow you to use them on your own web pages, and on individuals' web pages they're available for free. I should also mention that Dimensions has an API for non-commercial use, so it will allow you to freely download these metrics. If you're really smart, or you have some very smart people, and this is beyond my capabilities, but I read an article recently that showed how people are kind of hacking this to some extent. First of all, even though you can just do a simple search, there's no advanced search in Dimensions. You do a simple search using, and this is librarians, your Boolean, you love it, we all love it very much. It comes in, it works in this. You can also use your parentheses and your quote marks and everything like that to manage your searches within that simple thing, and within that simple search area. Some people are building up using the and, or the R in capitals. They're building up research groups, which is not something that appears to be available, but you can actually do this in Dimensions. I've tried it. You can also put in your institutional name and hope it's the right one. You can put in the version of it that you can find in quotes and do an institutional search, right? And you can start to do some analysis on this. I'll come back to the institutional name in Dimensions again. They also have altmetric data, and you can share the information, you can export all of this information, you download it instantly to a CSV or an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so this is one of the reasons that people are really interested in Dimensions, is because of its power. The other thing is that Dimensions from Digital Science, who are part of the Holsprink group, they also own Nature, Springer, Macmillan, and a whole bunch of other things. You know, really, they're the biggest academic publisher in the world. They're just a little bit bigger than Elsevier. So they built this from the ground up. They are using all kinds of new ways to connect the data, and so they're ending up with a very rich data set with all kinds of connections. That's what they're setting out to do. One of the things that we have to do, because this is quite an unknown, is to go in individually to our own institutions, look at our own researchers, if we can, compare them against something else that we've got. If you happen to have the Web of Science, take a look at them. I've checked it. You know, it's pretty good from the point of view of my institution and my researchers, but try it out for your own and see if it works for you. Ideally, for all of these resources, if you have a source of institutional information where you are maintaining, or somebody within your institution is maintaining lists of publications through a research information system or a profiling system or a CRIS, as we call them, the CV-based systems, these are excellent resources for testing against these resources, because none of them are perfect. In fact, they're very, very far from perfect. Even the ones you spend a fortune on are not right. So, as Arnold pointed out. Another look at Dimensions. They provide author profiles, so you can click on the link to the author's name, and they will accept they're using ORCID within this as well. So ORCID is coming into everything. This is Roseanne. You can see, you can get little analytics on the side. You can see her numbers of publications increasing. You can also look at versions of the field normalized, they call it the relative citation metric, and you can export this information. So you've got quite advanced metrics being available within this for free, and you have the possibility of being able to download or use APIs to pull information out of this system. So it's one worth watching. And there's an example of you can get an overview for a person. If you're able to build up a group, as I say, it takes a little bit of work. It's a job for the librarians, or for your institution. You can run these metrics as well, but it's not obvious within Dimensions. And it's not obvious because they want you to buy the version that gives you the analytics for as part of the subscription. So that's another view of this. The coverage compared with...
Can you please slow down?
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Thank you for letting me know. Thank you very much. I will slow down. To give you an idea of the coverage and how it's grown, because this is a new database, right? So you can see an analysis that's available in a paper in archive.org, shows the growth of the number of records and compares Dimensions, Scopus, and the Web of Science core collection. So you can see that and Google Scholar is there as the dotted line, but Google Scholar, it's very difficult for us to figure out what's going on in Google Scholar. So that's why it's dotted, and I'm not paying any attention to Google Scholar. But you can see that Dimensions, the blue line that's going up there, has started very much to outstrip the other resources. So it's bigger. Is it any better? That is the question. And some of that is going to, these Scopus and Web of Science have made a name for themselves because they're curated. Sometimes they're accused of being over-curated, that their coverage is not what it should be. They're not covering the journals. I would have a particular concern about journals from countries that are not what we call in the Anglophone area. In other words, that are not the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK. There are issues with languages, with types of material, and in particular, we know that for countries from the global south, that there is an absolute case of imbalance, where we know there are peer-reviewed journal articles, but they are not covered by Scopus or the Web of Science. So this is where it gets interesting. Some of these newer databases are trying to reach deeper and to cover more of these areas. So we've got the balance to figure out between the quality and the quantity of the data. I'm not talking about the journals, I'm talking about the data in these resources. This relates to what Arnold was talking about. Digital Science make available for free something called the Global Research Identifier Database. This allows you to go in for free, find your institutional name variants, as Arnold said, the 600 name variants or whatever and I'm amazed with, not that there's 600, but usually you see it where there are multiple languages involved. You know, we see with the National University of Ireland in Galway, they changed their name. That's a bad idea, right? So if you change your name, you're going to have to fix things up. It's a terrible idea to do. So you're going to make a complete mess out of this. You have to try and get your researchers to use the standardized version of a name when they're publishing. And there is a push to try and get identifiers for institutions. And that's what they do in Grid, which you can go in and you can fix the variant names of your institution in dimensions. That is not something that the other institutions allow you to do in a hands-on way. But you can, as Arnold said, write to Scopus, write to Web of Science and tell them that here are the list of name variants. We want them all to appear under this. And then you're going to maximize the impact of your institution. So that's Grid. Moving on to something that is not in any way, that doesn't allow you any access to the information, and that's Google Scholar. So we know from when we were working in Moldova, and some of you are very advanced in this area, I'm talking about Georgia here, Georgia has aggregated Google Scholar profiles. So this is an example of a Google Scholar profile. It's available for free. We encourage our researchers, along with their ORCID ID, ORCID profile, and their institutional profile, to get themselves a Google Scholar Citations profile as well. Why? Because it's a great way to get access to a lot of citations information for free, your H-index and so on. If you can't find it, this is how you get it. But you have to validate the publications, so you don't take it raw. That's what we mean. The profile is validated. So this information is information that you can get and that you can use at the researcher level. You can't do any analysis that I'm aware of in Google Scholar by institution or by country. You can do a special search, and let's see if it's here, yeah. And the last bit of it is just TCD. You can put in your own institutions, part of their email address, and you can get the full list of the Google Scholar profiles for your whole university. And as I say, Georgia has very cleverly managed to aggregate this across institutions as well. And I still don't know how you did that. So you'll have to share that information with us at some point. But we can't run any analyses in Google Scholar to show us for our country. Say we wanted to, imagine we wanted to find out how are we doing in agricultural sciences in Lithuania, for example. That would be a very difficult thing for us to do in Google Scholar. We would not get those charts that we'd want to be able to see. So we'd have to go someplace else. Publish or Perish is the free tool that you can download to your desktop, and you can run analyses of Google Scholar. There are certain limitations on it. It looks as if it's set up for authors only, but you can actually put in institutions, again using Boolean logic, and you could try putting in a country. You get very advanced metrics in Publish or Perish. So again, it's available for free. Microsoft Academic Search is something that has been around for a long time, but it was taken down and revitalized and rewritten from the ground up just a couple of years ago. It's highly respected because it's using artificial intelligence to make the linkages between the data. And most recently, you can see a message actually on its web pages saying Microsoft Academic Preview has arrived. They've actually disabled quite a lot of the functionality, so you can't download at the moment, from Microsoft Academic Search. You've got access to a huge database. There's trending topics. You can look at top authors and top institutions in there. And this is the range. I mean, look at it. You've got 209.5 million records of publications in there. Now we're talking. Now we're getting someplace, right? So this number of authors, and they're bringing in 48,000 journals. I didn't even know there were 48,000 journals in the world. 25,000 institutions, right? If you go in there today, you won't be able to do a huge amount with it. I'll show you what you can do, but they're bringing in this new functionality. You can see, here's my researcher Roseanne Kenny coming in again, and again the information is quite good. What Microsoft Academic has said is that they are now, within the last year, they've started to scrape the profiles that are out there on the web. And they're using artificial intelligence to try and do things which are actually quite difficult on the web, to identify what's a book and what's a person and what these different things are. So they're putting them together, and you get citations, a lot of citations information in here, and a author profile. And you can also get, in the latest version of it, an institutional profile too, which means you can compare institutions and filter them over time. So that's available in a preview version at the moment. So watch this space and you'll find that there will be a new version, which I think is going to be really interesting. And they're doing this institutional analytics. I wanted to mention this to you because it's relatively easy to get information about individual researchers for free on the web. And then you check it and make sure that it's okay, that you have the right name, and that it's linked in with ORCID if you can. But it's not so easy to do the institutional analytics. And yet that's often the thing that's going to really make friends for you within your organization, if you can show how your institution is doing. In Microsoft Academic, they run a kind of a ranking, and they do it using very interesting criteria. But they say on their web pages, you can run your own complex academic analytics using our data. Please contact us through the feedback form to learn about getting access to the Microsoft Academic Graph. So you can look at I haven't done this. If anybody wants to try it, I'd love to give it a go and compare the results. So that's Microsoft Academic. Lens.org. Has anybody here used Lens? Excellent. So Lens, I'd be interested to know how you're using it. It came from the patent citation database, one that is better than and has more coverage than any other patent citation database or patent indexing database that I know of. But it just got better by adding in huge numbers of scholarly publications and providing metrics on all of them. Let me show you. And it's free. There's no charge. There's no constraints. There's no snooping, as they say. Your data are free. You can register for Lens, and it comes from Australia, from the Queensland University of Technology, and a company there called Cambria. So Lens, it has recently, just in the last while, integrated with Unpaywall. So there's Unpaywall coming up again. So it has open access link outs, scholarly metrics, and they've got these full text snippets that are there. Lens.org will give you access to this enormous number of over 100 million patent records from these families, and we're looking at, again, a similarly enormous number of publication records. So 190,500 and so on, and all of these linkages as well. Here's an example of, I looked up and again put in there's a very simple search again for this. You can see what I put in. I put in Trinity College, Dublin, in quotes. I checked to see what it came out, and you can see the results. You can get links to individual publications, the open access link, the links to the patent, citations. This is really hard information to get. And I'll tell you one thing, based on what I just checked myself, compared with Scival, in terms of the patent citations, this resource is much better. It's better because, lens.org is better when it comes to those linkages. So, as Arnold was saying, if your country has a strategy about research informing industry, this is where you prove it, where the patents, the licenses are citing your work. You can track it. The only other place that I know where you can easily track it, apart from, LexisNexis will do it, but it's almost impossible to use it, in my opinion, is Scival, which is going to cost you a lot of money. And I'm actually, from what I can see, there's more information in this. And there's more patents, there's more linkages, there's more citations. More work needs to be done on this. Again, I'd love to hear what you think about this information. But that's not all with lens.org. You can see the citations information over on the side, the metrics, work cited by patents, citing patents. So the work cited by scholarly publications, the numbers of citations. But you can also get your collaborating institutions. So I'm going to go into that in just a bit more detail, and you can change the date range. This is just showing for my institution, so try it for your own one and see if it matches up with what you would expect. With my own one, it's telling me that our single biggest collaborator over the time period is University College Dublin, which might have been considered to be our arch rival until we discovered this information in other sources. So that matches what we see in Scopus and Web of Science. This list of collaborators is exactly the same as we would see in Scopus and Web of Science. We look at, here's my author, Roseanne Kenny. This is the top researchers by publications in Trinity. The kind of information that Arnold was showing you in Scopus and SciVal and in Web of Science and Insights, but here we have it presented in a very attractive way, and you can do that by researcher, by institution, and possibly by country. For the librarians who are looking at their subscriptions, these are the top journals by numbers of publications that come from our institution, right? So you can do the same for yourself and see where are we publishing the most. You can click on each one of these and drill right into the documents and see who's been writing in these papers. So that's very useful. And there's also a very nice collaboration map, a heat map. So for Trinity College Dublin, I just found Qatar on this map, and I can see that we have 6 collaborative publications with Qatar in the last 3 years. I can click into that and see who they are and who those people are. So I think, do you like lens.org? You're using it, yeah? Yeah? You find it useful? Yep. So I'm just going to mention one finder, because that is what they call, it's an enormous database, the world's largest collection of peer-reviewed articles. So they are most of these resources are using citations information and bibliographic data from Crossref, PubMed, and occasionally from some other sources. So that's the reason we've got, because of the open citations and because we've got these open source sets of data now. This is what we're getting, is building additional functionality on this data. So again, there's my researcher Roseanne Kenny, and you can see that it gives altmetric data here that you can click into. So just to kind of recap on those bibliometric tools then, I'm just keeping an eye on my time. Will you give me a warning when I need to stop? The coverage, you can see just what we've seen already. Web of Science is curated. This is the core collection, 71 million records. You'd think that was a lot, but really, compared to the other ones, it's not necessarily. But we've got this question of quality. In general, most people would say to you that the Web of Science has the highest quality data because it's curated. More so than Scopus, for example. This is the latest figures that I've got from their web pages. Curated means that they have editorial teams who are filtering the data. There are humans involved in this and not machines, basically. And they have editorial standards for inclusion. So Web of Science turned down, they only accept something like 10 to 15% of the submissions of the articles. So that's what I mean by curated. They have these quality standards. With these other ones, are they including what we call predatory journals? We need to check it and find out, what is the quality of the papers that we're talking about here. So, and you can see down here that there's a variant, but we're not comparing like with like. So again, as Arnold said, you use what works for you and try them out. The functionality, and this is a very high level one, the kind of metrics that we have in Web of Science, we'll get basic Web of Science metrics, which would be numbers of papers, numbers of publications, H-index, and citations per paper. What I mean by advanced is what Arnold was talking about, relative citations, compared relative to the rest of the world, relative to so these are more meaningful relative to the subject area, to the field. So we'll see dimensions gives you an advanced level of metrics, relatively advanced, for free. And so does lens.org. Microsoft Academic Search does, but the rest of the functionality is quite limited. Can you use this to analyze, these tools to analyze by researcher? You can use them all per person, by individuals. And some of them you can tweak in order to do broader searches using Boolean searching in order to create groups. There's a bit of work involved in it. You need to know what you're doing, but you do know what you're doing, so that's okay.
What is this S?
Good question. S, subscription. I've just put in there because I'm really looking at all of these together now to look comparing the functionality at a very basic level. Can you do a search for your institution? Yes, in all the subscribed resources. Yes, in a way, in the free resources. So in Lens, etc., with a little bit of work on it. Can you do the country searches? Yes, in all the subscribed resources. Sorry, I meant to put an S on SciVal there as well. And again, it's tricky, but you can kind of do it. But you usually have to pay for that level of analytics. Benchmarking, you don't get benchmarking anywhere except in the expensive SciVal or Insights. So unless you could create something yourself with an API, possibly. So moving on quickly. Does anybody here use Publons? Yeah? Irena, Arnold, are you nodding your head here? So Publons, I'm adding this to this because it's a different kind of a metric. So Publons comes from Clarivate Analytics, but it's free. At least it's free to use, but if you wanted to find out more about what's going on in your institution, you'd have to pay them for it. What it does is it looks at the reviews, who in your institution is doing reviews for journals, and also looks at editorial boards. So Milan was looking at how do you analyse who in your institution is on the editorial board of this journal. This is starting to analyse this information. And these are metrics that are esteem indicators. If your researchers are invited to become reviewers, that's a sign of their, that their respect in their area. That's a good thing. Again, you can go in, you can use it for free. You can see for my Trinity College Dublin, there's 193 reviewers. There's probably more than that, but those are the ones that are here. Now, you can get your researchers to sign up for this and create profiles, and they can give this information. I'm amazed that 193 of our researchers have actually provided information to this, and the journals are providing it as well. One thing we don't like to see is second in Ireland. We think that could be improved because we're not used to that. If we'd made a bit more effort, we'd like to, but this is giving you something. If you can try and work with your researchers, maybe you can change that figure. I know I'm going to try. But they've also got things like openness and merit, and they're talking about our journal editors. We've got a lot more, but that's something we can build on. So maybe that's something that people here might like to think about doing within your own institution, is because it gives you more impact and it attracts more impact for you as well. You can click on your name and see these are exactly who all of your people are. These are their reviews, their editorial records, and each individual. There's Elizabeth Newnham. She's in our School of Nursing and Midwifery. So she has a whole profile that she's actually put in there. So here's another profile with metrics that you can use. So those are the metrics. Very quickly, I've got alternative Altmetrics. All of the Altmetrics databases provide free information at one level, but again, if you want to find out what's happening at your institution, you have to pay. So, except for Impact Story, who I checked with Jason, and they don't have any institutional way. Not even if you pay for it, they're not going to help you to figure out what's going on in your institution. So, the kind of things we're talking about with these Altmetrics are tracking policy documents where your researchers' works have been cited. This is, one of the kind of gold standards. Everybody wants to be cited and to show that their research is having an effect in their country by being turned into legislation. This really shows that the research is not happening in an ivory tower, and that it's meaningful to the people of the country. So if you can track and find policy documents, that's a really good thing to be able to do. There is a sort of another side to this that I'll mention in a moment. It also tracks news stories, blog posts, Twitter sites, Wikipedia entries, which are now being considered to be Wikipedia has moved, I'm sure you know, very far from being a derided, kind of part of that students would be, sort of slapped on the wrist if they started to cite it. Now we see that Wikipedia has at least the high editorial standards of publications like the Oxford Dictionary and others. And any of you who've written, actually, can you just tell me, has anybody here written a Wikipedia entry? Very good. So you know how difficult it is to get it through the review process, and that everything has to be cited and backed up. Every image has to be available on Creative Commons, so that this is something. So a Wikipedia entry or citation is a very valuable thing in this world today. And I know that some institutions actually employ somebody to write Wikipedia entries to cite their research in order to make this. And this is something that you can actually influence if you have, so that gives you more influence and impact. And there are others as well, YouTube entries and so on. The Altmetrics tools, as I say, they're sorry, this one moved up. The Plum X is a subscription one as well. The Kudos, does anybody here use Kudos? Some people down here are just using everything. So Kudos is being used. Yes. She does look for everything. I'm delighted Irena is everywhere. Her personal impact is superb. So in many of these Altmetrics, they're already embedded in repositories, and most of you will have maybe the plugin for altmetric.com in your repository. So for every article you'll see the hits and the downloads. There's a free plugin, anybody can use it. Dimensions also has their plugin that you can put in. Dimensions is using the altmetric.com plugin. It's from the same company. Digital Science produces altmetric.com. And many journal articles and publishers will also use these plugins. PlumX has been bought by Elsevier. Again, another one of those who's gone that way. Yes? Yeah?
Can I ask you why some cells have several checks and others have not?
Yeah, because it's a good question. You've spotted there's an error. Everything moved up. I can fix it. So I tell you, all of these resources have a subscription element, and they also have a free element. So, and two of them have a free plugin, altmetric.com and PlumX. I'll fix that on the slides that I distribute for you afterwards. So, altmetric.com is the one that we've seen, the first one there. It comes from Digital Science, and it provides a whole lot of this kind of information. We got a free trial to it, and we're just about, I've managed to persuade people in the university after a free trial to pay for it across a bunch of different groups, because they're starting to see that this can work for them. Arts and humanities in particular find this very useful, very interesting. The library will contribute to this, not only because of helping the researchers, but my librarian would also like to track the impact of the library, the work of the researchers. And we think that this is one of the challenges. I was talking to Susan about this, is that after we're finished working with all of our researchers, we really want to work with the library's impact in its own right, as a research, as a agency within the university that publishes and produces publications, but also that undertakes various different other activities too. So this is the kind of thing that you'll get, the mentions over a period of time, the location of the Twitter users, and you also get, sorry I don't have it on this, what kind of Twitter users they are. Are they fellow scientists? Are they members of the public? Are they journalists? So just when you're on Twitter, and if you think you've got any privacy, you don't. They know who you are. But we can also use that, because this information can come out and inform us about who's using who's tweeting about your work. So the London School of Economics did Impact blog, which many of you will know, had a really good paper a couple of years ago, which showed that targeted social media, especially on Twitter, can generate additional citations to published works. So that's where this is coming in. It's about societal impact, but it's also could be about informing strategy, which can drive scholarly citations to your work. So, and here's the mentions, the articles, where you can see picked up by 18 news outlets, tweeted by 7, and so on. So, and the word map, oh yeah, there it is. Members of the public, 71% of the tweets were from members of the public, and 29% of them for this article were practitioners, doctors, and other healthcare professionals. So you can see we can't get that information from bibliometric sources. Altmetrics is the only place we can get this, and as our funders start to pay more and more attention to this area of societal, cultural, and economic impact, this is where Altmetrics is becoming mainstream. So and that's a list of the news stories for this particular paper. A lot of news stories all around the world, US radio stations and so on, that even our communications office in our university don't know about. They need this tool too. So if you can't get access to this, and obviously you can use the free version of it, but there may be people within your institution who might have an interest, even for a short period of time, to doing a trial and getting the kind of information to see, informing your strategy in this area. Plum Analytics is very similar, so I'm not going to go into details on Plum. It's owned by Elsevier. It doesn't have quite the same reach or scope, and certainly, if I can say this, I know I'm being recorded, that from the point of view of the Irish researchers who we surveyed last year, the majority of them, if they had to choose between altmetric.com and Plum Analytics, they would choose altmetric.com. Okay. So I'm just mentioning Kudos. A lot of our researchers, and probably yours, use Kudos to track their social media impact and other impact. Every researcher can use this for free, but we can't see what's going on in there unless, so you'll get a report, and it's a good idea to do it for yourselves, but from an institutional point of view, unless you subscribe, you can't see what's happening at the institutional level. And finally, am I done? Yeah. The open research metrics. Most of you don't need to be told anything about this at all, but I feel I should mention it. In your repository, you've probably got the hits and the downloads, and sometimes you've got plugins that show you the country of origin of who's accessing them, and these are very valuable. We all use this to show the power of our repository and to show another view on the use of our research data. So those are very valuable. Over here on the left is an example from the brilliant Università de Minho, where their usage statistics are presented in a really nice way. So, but there's all kinds of different ways of using that. There's a wonderful article from Iowa State University called Purposeful Metrics, and it's about matching your institutional metrics to your purpose and audience, and that goes into in detail about the use of the statistics that are in the institutional repositories. But there are other open science metrics as well, or open research metrics. The new open publishing platforms, this is the latest thing that's come on to give us something else to work with, are very interesting. Lots of people would be familiar with the Gates Foundation have their own publishing platform, which is open access. In Ireland, the Health Research Board started their own publishing platform last year, and this year, this summer, we saw the European Commission put out a tender for a publishing platform, an open access publishing platform for the European Commission, because the funders are getting tired of having to pay author processing charges and seeing the prices going up and up. And I'm quoting a particular big funder when I say that. And they also, especially in the medical area, really need to get that research out as fast as possible. This is very interesting because it is open peer review as well. The articles go up immediately, no review, but then they start getting reviewed. And I looked at one here. You can go in and have a look, and you can see the reviewers and you can see the ticks on it. And this is where the European Commission one is. Their tender looked almost exactly like the tender for the Health Research Board's tender. So we can expect that there will be a publishing resource in the European Commission within a very short period of time that will be open peer review, have all these publications in it, and will also provide us with metrics. And it's providing citations from Google Scholar. So that's Faculty 1000 and Altmetrics coming in there as well. So those publishing platforms and publishers are providing their metrics as well. Impact Story, the wonderful Impact Story from, we saw Jason, and this provides us with individuals sign up for it, and Impact Story can track the openness of the research. This is something that is going to start getting included in promotions and evaluations for academics. So again, it's one of the areas that they should be encouraged, arguably, in getting involved with this. You can see for this researcher, 82% of her publications are available in open access, full open access. 58%. She's got a global reach. It tells her that only 1% of the researchers get that much international attention. So Impact Story can give really valuable metrics for for the researcher. I'm not going to go into on paywall because it's not about metrics, but it is about open access monitoring. So it's embedded in Dimensions, it's embedded in Web of Science. And that's how you can see what's open access and what's not. In Scopus and in SciVal, Elsevier are using their own way of doing this, which is really bad. And they only track gold open access for obvious reasons. So when you're doing open access monitoring, which a lot of us are going to be required to do very soon, what percentage of your papers are available on open access? The European Commission has said by 2020 it wants all of its funded journal articles to be available on open access immediately upon publication. The job of those of us who are on the ground have to see how far away are we from that? How are we going to do this? And the same with Copernio, both of which have a browser plugin that you can for Chrome and for Firefox, so that if you come across an article, as you know, it's very like the open access button. You come across an article and you have this extension on your browser. You can click through and find the open access paper in your repository. It's very much based on DOIs. So again, our open science metrics, the subscription ones, the free ones, and the open source ones are available. We're talking about Impact Story, which is very open. And Dimensions. You can look at these later on. So as we can see, we don't just have one elephant. We've got a whole herd of them, and they're all marching off sort of without us. So we have to, and some of them are babies and they're just starting off, and some of them are big old ones, But we have to familiarise ourselves with all of these. The issues, again, I'll just kind of sort of top up on them, are of coverage, of accuracy, making sure that the right disciplines are covered. Certain types of research outputs like books are very poorly covered in many of them. With altmetric tracking, we discovered in my country that while it's a great idea to get policy papers covered, we have to tell the altmetric agencies how to do it. So what that means is that because altmetric.com said, should we be going into your gov.ie website, which is where the government papers are, and should we be tracking them? And I was going, yeah, like, of course, but it's not obvious to them. They need to know where the policy papers are. So again, this means engagement with these people. You can very easily contact them. If you can't contact them, I'll let you know how to do it, and you can figure out how to do it. The digital object identifiers are an issue in many things, and it was great to hear that on Paywall is actually going to start finding articles and papers by other means, as well as they're going to do a sophisticated title, author, and other kind of algorithm to track those, because we've seen the issues with the fact that we don't have DOIs on all of our publications. That can mean that they're not counted. So we either have to figure out a way to get ourselves DOIs or work with something else. Altmetrics, in theory, they say they work with ISBNs. They will track handles in repositories. To be honest, I haven't seen a lot of impact from those areas. It's all DOIs. The solutions, I've put some of them there, but I'm going to jump down to library-based analysis and data cleansing. Again, for us to go in, we're the only ones who have the skills. We're the only ones who care enough about this. We're possibly the only ones who are crazy enough to actually get involved in doing something like this, So we can do it. Those are the solutions. Nobody else is going to do this in our organisation. I'm going to leave you with this. It was a survey that was done in Ireland about what makes people choose these different resources, and the cost, and how important the cost or the fact that they're involved in rankings was not the most important thing. The quality, the data quality, I'll just point out, was the single most important thing to all of the people who are experts in this area, 40 of them in libraries, bibliometricians, research institutional data officers. It was the data quality that really mattered, more so than anything else. So that has to be our criteria as well. I'm also going to leave you with a summary of what came out of that, all of the issues that were surfaced out of that survey. And one of the big ones, it says that all of the tools are flawed. Everybody in my country wanted to work together. to try and make them better. So we've got now a group that's unfunded. The project is not funded, but our researchers, our librarians in this area are coming together to work in these areas to try and move from a very fragmented area that's inequitable, so it's not fair. Lots of institutions can't afford these resources, even in my country, that's unreliable, to using something that's much more joined up and coherent. And we've got a shopping list that you can read later on of what we want. And these are our work packages. We've set out across the institutions to decide on a small number of metrics and define them that we can report on and that we can try and make as good as we can. And we are going to work on the institutional name variants for everybody, and we are going to work on the coverage of the journals in our country to make sure that our researchers are counted properly in Web of Science, Scopus and Dimensions. We're working with the 3 agencies, and we're working on planning and testing what happens when we start to define who's going to get counted in this in each institution. Are we counting research students as well as postdoctoral students? Are we only counting professors and PIs? So we need to decide this, who has the ORCID IDs, and the second phase we're going to start to look at monitoring open access on a national basis. So we have our work cut out for us, but as I say, we're the only ones who can do it. There's a whole lot of other indicators we can look at, and some of these are very relevant to libraries. I'm not going to go into them at this time, but we can look at them another time. What I should say is that these are lenses through which we look at our research. This is not about the quality of the research. As Arnold said, this is about the way we look at it, and we can put in different filters and different lenses, and we can look at the data and look at our research in all kinds of different ways. It's always a reductionist way, but the thing is that if you're going to set out on this particular safari, you're going to need a good camera. You're going to need some good tools and equipment to do it the best that you can get on, and I wish you the best of luck with that one. Thank you very much.